Street Blues.
Rachel, the kid's asleep in the next room. What happened? 4 o'clock this morning, she was attacked.
At 11, we're pushing up daisies.
Ron and me like it so much over here, we've decided to build a holiday villa. And we're going to name it in memory of our much-loved mummy, Polly. Polly Villa.
Pushing up daisies, one of the highlights for Saturday night on Channel 4.
Just started over on ITV, a fishy new comedy series. Hey, Brian, it's a whopper. Now, here on 4, how well can you spot the real thing? Go on, tell the truth.
Number 1, what is your name, please?
My name is Dennis Sievers, and I live in the past.
Number 2.
My name is Dennis Sievers, and I live in the past.
Number 3.
My name is Dennis Sievers, and I live in the past.
Only one of these people is the real Dennis Sievers and has sworn to tell the truth. And tonight's panelists are David Jensen, Diane Harron, Tony Vandenberg, Patricia Brake, and here's the host, Graham Garden.
Hello and welcome to Tell the Truth, and welcome to our panel who've just met 3 people claiming to be Dennis Sievers who lives in the past. And if you open the envelopes in front of you, you'll find his signed statement. And it reads as follows. I, Dennis Sievers, live as closely as possible to the way the previous owners of my 18th century house would have lived. With the help of a liveried footman, I occupy the only house in the country that is lived in, lit, heated, cleaned, decorated, and entertained in as it was in the past. Different rooms in the house show the ups and downs of a family called Jarvis over 2 centuries, from Georgian to Victorian times. I have to light 93 candles, look after 8 open fires, warm my beds with hot embers, I even clean my teeth with hedgehog quills, as Mr. Jarvis would have done, and, of course, I sweep the carpets with tea leaves. Signed, Dennis Sievers. There you are, panel. That's the name and that's the claim. Now, by questioning these 3 people, you'll have to find out which is the real Dennis Sievers and which are the 2 imposters. You have until the hooter goes, and the questioning starts this time with David Jensen, starting now, please.
Thank you. Number 1, where do you live exactly?
Spitalsfield.
Now, where's that near?
East End, just over the back there by the markets.
I see. Number 2, why do you live this way?
It's lots of fun.
Must be a lot of work, though, as well.
It is, but work is fun. So we're here.
Number 3, do you open your house for visitors at all? People to come and see the way things were?
I have about 3 open evenings during any one week. People come, there's about 8 people come to it.
Mm-hmm. And number 3, do you have a family that lives with you in this house? Do you have children?
No, only the footman.
Mm-hmm. Number 1, when did you decide to go back in time like this?
It was...
And the hooter there decides that your time is up, I'm afraid, David, and Diane Harron takes over the question, starting now.
If I could pick that question up, when did you decide to live like this?
Just over 3 years ago.
And why did you decide to live like this?
Because I wanted to bring the 18th century back again. So I bought this house and restored it.
Number 2, do you object to the 20th century?
No. I enjoyed the 20th century.
Then why do you live close to the 18th century?
It's best to appreciate the 20th century from the 18th.
Number 3, could I ask you, where do you get your hedgehog quills from these days?
Usually at auctions and places like this. You know, there are some shops in the West End where you can buy this.
There goes that hooter again, Tony Vandenberg. Take it up, please,
Number 3,
starting now.
You look as if you enjoy life. Have you any serving wenches?
Unfortunately not. No.
Well, what on earth are you doing such a ridiculous job? If you're going to go back, you must go back properly. Number 1, Spitalfields. What goes on in the crypt that is unique in the church?
Well,
It's all right, you don't know. Don't have to fluff about it. It's a waste of time. Number 2, what famous murder took place within 100 yards? Several took place within 100 yards of Spitalfields Church.
Jack the Ripper.
Number 3. What sort of food do you eat? Do you eat all the original foods?
And there goes the hooter again for Tony, who wasted a good 10 seconds telling the challengers not to fluff around with their answers.
I was being a wild boar. He should have been eating.
Patricia Brake, it's your turn, please, starting now.
Number 2, do you pay 18th century wages to your footman, or?
I wish I did.
What do you pay him, can I ask?
Well...
50 shillings a year.
No.
No, it's all right, private. Number 3, do you have a good dentist?
Quite good.
I think you need one with
Okay.
hedgehog quills, yes. Number 1, where do you get your hedgehog quills for your...
Same
your
again,
teeth?
auctions.
Auctions,
Yes.
really. Number 2, do you have a television in this 18th century house?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's just lighting that I object to.
I see. Number 1, what do you do with all the tea leaves? I mean, you clean your carpets with tea leaves. Don't they just pile up? Don't you get little piles of them all over the house?
You probably do, but there goes the hooter. That's all the time and that's all the questions. So, panel, will you please vote? 1 vote only. Once the number's on the card, it stays there. Meanwhile, at home, you have another chance to look at our challengers and decide if you think the real Dennis Sievers who lives in the past is number 1, or number 2, or number 3. And the cards are all marked now, so we'll go first of all to David Jensen for his vote. Who do you go for and why?
I found that's very, very difficult. Number 3 didn't know at first much about the hedgehog quills, where he'd purchased them. Number 2, I think this might be a double bluff because he looks as if he, dressed in a very English sort of way and very proper, but I'm not sure that he knew the answers right away off the top of his head. And number 1, I wasn't very sure about something that Tony was asking him about the area that he lives in, but yet I somehow have some sort of feeling that he is the man that we're after here. So number 1, my vote goes to
Number 1 you go for, David. Diane Harron, who do you go for?
Well, I have the same sort of gut feeling. I must say, number 3, I didn't feel he was convincing about it of life. And number 2, I was impressed at first by what he was saying about having a television, and he was just against lights. But in fact, from his affidavit, he's against other things as well. So I plump for number 1. I think he's living in the past.
2 going for number 1 there. Tony, it's your turn.
No, I don't think number 1. He had an absolute vague expression on his face, although that may be his usual one. But he didn't have anything there at all. Number 2. Good God, it's in the middle of Jack the Ripper country. I thought everybody knew that who lived in Spitalfields. The first one, I had the crypt there is where they treat alcoholics like myself who live on methylated. So having ruled those 2 out because they can't live in Spitalfields and not know that, I plump for number 3.
Number 3 you go for. And finally, Patricia, your vote.
Well, I disagree entirely. I can't believe it's number 3 because I can't believe that you get hedgehog quills in auctions that you actually clean your teeth with. I mean, imagine what state they must be in. Number 1, I think, looks too sensible. I mean, I love the idea of the house in Spitalfields. I think that's a wonderful idea. But I just think you don't look eccentric enough. I mean, it is an eccentric thing to do. And number 2, although you seem the most obvious, I think you seem to be the only eccentric sitting opposite me. So I've got for number 2.
Being the only eccentric present, number 2 gets a vote there. So 2 for 1, 1 for 3, 1 for 2. Let's find out the truth as we ask, will the real Dennis Sievers who lives in the past please stand up? Well done, Dennis. Well done, and well done, Patricia, the only one to get it right. Let's find out who your successful imposters were. Number 3 with your vote there. What's your real name and what do you actually do?
My name is Barry Gamble. I'm a hypermarket manager.
And number 1 with 2 votes.
My name is Joe Long, and I'm a teacher.
Well, thanks both very much indeed. We'll see you later on in 1-to-1. Meanwhile, turning to the real Dennis, where do you get your hedgehog quills from?
From Club Row Market. I find them on stalls.
On the stalls in the market, not at auction?
No, absolutely.
Have you always had a great passion for the past?
Yes, I like to see it living. I don't like it dead. And my life in England has very much been involved in exploring institutions of the past, and I just like to see my house with things that you might see in a museum, but working.
You don't dress up in 18th century clothes?
No, I'm not at all silly about it. I'm in jeans most of the time. Footman dresses occasionally, but not me. I'm just right there.
And I presume your bathroom and plumbing arrangements are reasonably modern?
Yes, they're at the back of the house. It's called the wash house, and but chamber pots are used and so on. Everything every night.
Well, best of luck with your house, which is also your home and not a museum. I'm sure you'd go along with that. And if anyone wants to find it in Spitalfields, it's the only one in town that has straw on the road outside to cut out the noise of the horses and carriages going past. Dennis Sievers, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
And now, here are 3 more people who want to play Tell the Truth.
Number 1. What is your name, please?
My name is Ken Wallace, and I have flown an autogyro higher than anyone else in the world.
Number 2.
My name is Ken Wallace. I have flown an autogyro higher than anyone in the world.
Number 3.
My name is Ken Wallace, and I have flown an autogyro higher than anyone else in the world.
Only one of these people is the real Ken Wallace, and in part 2 we'll find out which one has sworn to tell the truth.
Whichever filter coffee machine you choose to use, be it ever so stylish, or sophisticated, or elaborate, or simple, it's worth remembering it can only ever be as good as the filter coffee you put into it. Lions Original.
Once upon a time there was a guy called Jim. He was A-OK, but his clothes were dim. Then he went to Burton and he thought,
that's nice.
Clothes look great and he liked the price. You get bags for clothes at Burton. It's time for a change, alright. He kept in shape every day in the park. Tipped for the top, he made his mark. Out on the town he drove them wild. Even at home he did it all with style. Down at the pub with the boys for a drink, they took one look at Jim. It made them think. You get bags for clothes at Burton. You get bags for clothes at Burton.
Jack uses Bosch power tools. But Harry's no fool. His tools cost him less. However, Jack's jigsaw has a balanced action that doesn't jig like Harry's. And Jack's planer has tungsten carbide blades that'll last 10 times longer than the steel one Harry's sticking with. And Jack's sander quietly achieves a sort of finish that it sounds like Harry's harder pressed to get. So the question is, do you pick up something cheaper? Or do you buy Bosch?
This is just like the dances at home. The girls had to dance with each other back there too, while the blokes nipped out for a drop of the amber nectar. Truth! There's a bloke down there with no strides on.
Foster's, the Australian for lager.
You know, I thought I was a pretty good cook until I met the genius. To cook all these different things, I simply touched this panel and it worked out the cooking times, all by itself. By the way, it also cooks cakes beautifully. See what I mean? A perfect sponge in 4 minutes. Mind you, I can still teach it a thing or two about icing.
The Panasonic Genius, a bit brighter than your average oven.
Welcome back to Tell the Truth. Now, at the end of part 1, you remember, we met these 3 people all claiming to be Ken Wallace, who has flown an autogyro higher than anyone else in the world. Well, panel, if you open the envelopes in front of you, you'll find the signed statement, which says, I, Ken Wallace, have been flying autogyros for 24 years, and I hold the world altitude record of 18,504 feet for these aircraft. The main difference between an autogyro and a helicopter is that an autogyro's rotors are unpowered. They glide round just like a sycamore seed, and an ordinary engine and propeller power the plane. I piloted 007's autogyro, called Little Nelly, over a volcano for the Bond film You Only Live Twice. But there are many applications, including police and military, for these aircraft, and we are soon to go into production. Signed, Ken Wallace. There you are, panel, that's the name and that's the claim. You've got to find out who's real and who are the two imposters. This time the questioning starts at this end of the table with Patricia Brake. Starting, if you would, now, please.
Were you in the RAF? Is that what you were trained?
Yes.
And how did they actually check that you'd flown higher than anyone else in an autogyro?
Oh, it was measured by the FAI, the official body, with a recording barograph.
I
All
see.
probably seen.
Number 2, are you in the Guinness Book of Records?
Yes.
And were you trained in the RAF as well?
Yes.
Number 3, what was your rank in the RAF?
Flight Lieutenant, then finally Wing Commander.
And when did you make the film of You Only Live Twice?
1966.
And did you have a moustache once?
Yes.
You did. Is it more dangerous flying an autogyro than a normal jet engine?
The hooter puts pay to that, I'm afraid, and the questions go to Tony. Starting, please, now.
Are you interested, number 1, in the history of aircraft?
Yes.
Well, what was the first flying balloon to leave this country?
Oh, I wouldn't know the date of that, but
Not the date.
1850.
Where?
So,
And who was it?
I think it was in London.
Number 3. What is the advantage of this at all? I mean, what's the point of having something that goes round and does nothing?
Well, it's a very manoeuvrable aircraft. It can move in small spaces. It can get off in a very small field.
All right, thank you very much. Number 2, what are the rules over
And
London?
there goes that hooter again, I'm afraid. Diane takes it up now.
Number 1, what are the military applications for an autogyro?
Well, firstly, observation, camera platform, or any sort of sensing platform. It can fly very low. It could fire anti-tank rockets.
Number 2, can I ask you, is it a dangerous thing to fly? I mean, compared to, say, a helicopter or a jet fighter?
Not at all.
When did you learn to fly an autogyro?
1959.
I mean, you didn't learn this in the Royal Air Force, though. I mean, that's not the sort of thing they do, is it? Where did you learn?
I privately tutored myself in learning it.
Yeah. Number 3, you say you're soon to go into production. Who are we, and production of autogyros for what?
Well...
And the hooter again stops you just when it's getting interesting. It always happens, doesn't it? David, you take it up now. Starting now.
Thank you, number 2. What is the name of your company that you're going into production with?
Westland.
Number 1, what was the volcano that you flew over when you were piloting Little Nell?
Shinmoe, I think. Shinmoe.
Okay. Number 3, what do you wear when you're flying a gyrocopter?
a thermal suit in order to keep the cold out, because there's no protection at all.
I see. Who invented the gyrocopter, number 2?
It was invented in 1929 by Sierra. He was a Spaniard.
Uh-huh. And does Britain make many gyrocopters these days?
No.
No.
And that's all the time we have. That's all the questions. Fascinating technical stuff coming out at the end there, but it's time to vote, I'm afraid. And just the one number, please. And while the panel put their numbers on their cards, you at home can have another look and decide if you think the real Ken Wallace, autogyro pilot, is number 1, or number 2, or number 3. And the cards are all marked, so let's hear the verdict, starting with you, Patricia. Who are you going to go for, and why?
Well, for the simple reason, I mean, it's a terribly unfair reason, number 3, but simply because you haven't got a moustache. I know that's not fair. It's because I know so little about aircraft, you see. That's the simple reason. Number 2 looks exactly how I imagined a pilot to look. I mean, absolutely central casting pilot, I think, and very twinkly and funny, and I just can't believe it's you. It's absolute instinct. I think that it's number 1. That's who I think it is.
Calling on that instinct again there. Number 1, you say. Tony, who do you go for?
Well, I don't go for number 1. I've always found boffins love history, and actually it was Edward Jenner, the doctor, who was the first person who cured smallpox. He was the first person to take a flying machine up in this country. He didn't know that. Besides, he looks rather like a Russian spy, and we couldn't have it. Number 3, I can see with his moustache, but I think his kite would be of the flying officer kite variety. And I go for number 2. He answered with authority and, not the slightest doubt about it.
Absolutely, no doubt. The authority of number 2. Diane, who are you going to choose?
Well, I don't think it's number 1 because I think he looks a bit like Tony, who looks like a Russian spy. So I don't think it's him. And also, he didn't know the name of the volcano, so I wasn't convinced. Number 3, I don't mind that you don't have a moustache, but I have a feeling that it wasn't you either. And I'm utterly, utterly convinced also that it's number 2.
She's getting very intelligent.
Yes, she is. Wait till we see the result. We may find out if that's good or bad. David, who are you going to go for?
Well, I think number 1 looks like a hypnotist. He also didn't know his history very well, immediately anyway, from Tony, so that discounted him for me. Number 3 didn't have any really good practical uses for the gyrocopter. And number 2, because he is sitting upright, and again, this could be a double bluff situation, but he did answer authoritatively, so I'm going to go for number 2, and he does look like the sort of fellow that would do this.
3 there for number 2, 1 for number 1. Nobody's going for number 3. Well, let's find out, as we say. Will the real Ken Wallace, auto gyro pilot, please stand up? Well done, Ken. Well done again, Patricia. Let's, before we talk to Ken, find out who the imposters were. Number 3, who, without a moustache, didn't really stand a chance. But what's your real name and what do you really do?
My real name is Dick Wilson, and I'm a chartered accountant.
And number 2, who fooled most of them, what's your real name?
My name is Roy Ebers. I'm a silverware buyer in a famous Bond Street shop.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for coming on the show. Now, Ken, can we just clear some things up? I take it you are not a hypnotist nor a Russian spy?
No, definitely not. Neither of those things.
Well, in fact, we can see you in action now. Perhaps you can explain how this wonderful machine works. No. That is just the ordinary propeller and motor there that's pushing it forward?
Yes, the rotor is driven mechanically before you let the brakes off, but once you're running forward, it is then all aerodynamically driven.
So there's nothing spinning the rotor blade once
No. So if the engine stops, the rotor still keeps turning, but you have to find a place to sit it down quickly.
How quickly do you come down?
Oh, it's quite gentle. It's the best aircraft in which to have an engine fail of any sort.
And Diane asked if it was dangerous. Is it, in fact?
It's as dangerous as a high-powered motorcycle. It depends on the rider. Yes.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming along tonight to answer questions. Thank you, Ken Wallace. And now it's time for 1-to-1. And here are 4 people that you've met before. You'll remember Joe and Barry, who pretended to live in the past, and of course Roy and Dick, who told you they were autogyro pilots. But there is one fact about one of these people that we've withheld from you until now, and that fact is this. One of these 4 people is a world champion stilt walker. There. Now, remember, in 1-to-1, you only have 20 seconds to question the person sitting directly opposite you. At the end of that time, I ask you to say then and there if you think they're telling the truth or not. Start with you, David. Your 20 seconds begins now.
Thank you. You're world champion. Is that because of the height of the stilts?
Yes.
And how high are they?
24 feet.
24 feet. How do you get on the stilts?
You have a gantry.
Uh-huh. And where did you qualify for this title?
Well, I worked my way up from little stilts, and that's it.
Yes, but where, was there a world event, a stilt walking event or something that you...
There's a hooter event, I'm afraid. David, yes or no? Is he telling you the truth?
No, he's not telling me the truth.
No, you say Dick is not telling the truth. Is Roy going to tell the truth? Diane, it's up to you to find out, starting now.
Roy, how high are you on your stilts?
26 feet.
Well, how tall are you?
6 foot.
So the stilts are only 20 feet?
Yes.
Well, in fact, 20 feet from the bit where your feet join onto them. What about the bit that comes on up at your sides? How high are they?
There's no bit.
You just perch on the
Feet
top?
are strapped in.
Open mouthed and nothing comes out but a hooter. Is he telling the truth,
He
Diane?
certainly is not.
Not, you say. Another no there for Roy. It's Barry's turn to be grilled by Tony, starting now.
What on earth is the idea or use of it?
It's there. It's like a mountain.
What, you mean people complain about your aura and so you have to get away from them?
Something like that.
Do you have to develop strong thigh muscles?
Yes, very much. Because your legs are strapped onto the stool.
That's all you get, Tony. Yes or no? Is he telling the truth?
I really thought he was a liar and should be in the cabinet, but now... I think he's telling the truth now.
Yes, you say. Right, a yes there for Barry. Finally, Patricia, speaking to Joe, starting now.
Joe, have you had any accidents?
I have.
It's easy to fall off them, is it?
Very easy.
Yes. I mean, have you broken legs and things like that?
I have.
Do you do street theatre? I mean, when do you actually practice it?
We do carnivals and promotion work all over the country.
And where do you practice? In your back garden?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all the time you have, yes or no?
I don't think Joe's telling the truth, no.
No, you say. Right, that's 1 yes, 3 no's there. Well, it's a moment of truth. Will the real champion stilt walker please stand up? And believe me, when the real Joe Long stands up, he really stands up. Now, Joe, you look extremely high up there. Are those your championship stilts?
No, I'm standing about 20 foot high there. As you can see, it's quite windy as well.
Yeah. And how much higher are you on the actual world record stilts?
I go up to 30 foot from the head down.
What's the biggest problem stilt walking at that height?
Well, I suppose, you know, when you're doing a promotion job down some high street and you walk past a bedroom window, I suppose, you know, and see something
You misunderstood the question. I said, what are the problems?
Oh, sorry. Woodpeckers.
Joe Long, I'm surprised your name didn't give you away to the panel, but thanks very much indeed. And thank you all for coming on Tell the Truth. Thank you. And panel, well, a showing this week at least. Patricia got 2 of the rounds right. Tony Vandenberg didn't get any of them right, but I'm sure he'll be back and try again sometime. Sure. Thank you all very much anyway. Thank you, David Jensen, Diane Harron, Tony Vandenberg, and Patricia Bray. And that's all from me. I'll be back soon with some more people who may or may not tell the truth. I'll see you then. Goodbye.